People, please give me your thoughts, opinions, and analysis down in the comments below in response to two questions that I want you to answer. And feel free to answer these whether you're an Ohio State fan or a fan of any other college football team. I want all thoughts and perspectives. Question number one: what kind of pressure do you, not anyone else, but you personally, what kind of pressure do you think Ryan Day should be under currently heading into 2023 and the near immediate future? Question number two is, what kind of expectation, tangible, measurable expectation, do you think should be placed upon the Ohio State football team in 2023? I know that Ohio State has baseline expectations, same with every program, but depending on returning production, depending on other things as well, the development of players, taking into account past coaching staffs, taking into account resources, and things that may vary from year to year. What kind of expectation do you think should be placed upon Ohio State? I'm curious to see your guys' thoughts, and I encourage you again to answer those two questions and comment them down below. Question one, again, is what kind of pressure do you think Ryan Day should be under entering this season and the near immediate future? Do you think it should be hot seat pressure, pressure to beat Michigan and win the Big Ten, pressure to win it all? And then basically, what do you think is the tangible, measurable representation of that pressure, which is the expectation? That's question number two. What kind of expectation should be placed upon him? Do you think going 11-2 again is acceptable or even good, given the fact that Ohio State is outside the top 25 in returning production? Or do you think that 12, 13 wins should be the expectation? Or are you going to be more of an extremist and say if they don't go 14-1 and lose a random game and win the national title, or reach the national title undefeated but lose, or if they go 15-0, basically that if they aren't in the national title game, the whole season's a failure? So comment your thoughts on those two questions down below. And please subscribe to the channel and like the video if you haven't already. Let's talk about some real Ohio State football. Let's talk Buckeye business here on College Football with Sam. So Ryan Day, after 2021, after that embarrassing loss in Ann Arbor, the first time that Michigan won in a decade, the first time that Jim Harbaugh ever beat Ohio State, Ryan Day maims and just destroys, cleans out the entire defensive staff outside of Larry Johnson. Cleans it out. He brings in Jim Knowles, a defensive coordinator from Oklahoma State, who had by far the best defense in the Big 12 that year. He brings in veteran, experienced, highly valuable college and NFL positional coaches on defense. Even did it on offense with Justin Fry. UCLA's offensive coordinator brought him in as the offensive line coach. And we've seen the results. Now in 2022, that loss to Michigan was even more humiliating than the first. But you saw the offensive line improve. You saw the defense. The defense as a whole, outside of maybe secondary, improved. The front seven was dramatically better against the run. It was much better at getting pressure. The secondary, I'd say, probably safely somewhat regressed to a certain degree, maybe. But it was either the same or slightly improved, slightly underperformed compared to 2021. It was not, the defense didn't get worse. Statistically, the defense got that much better. And if you don't believe me about stopping the run, what happens when you take out Donovan Edwards' 2 long runs? What happens when you do that? I know that the big plays hurt in that game, but you got to look at things from a realistic standpoint. Michigan didn't beat Ohio State the same way they did in 2021. Was it similar philosophically? Yes. But Michigan beat Ohio State based off of big-time, explosive, well thought out, schematic plays. They coached circles around Ohio State, both in 22 and in 2021, but big plays were that much more of a factor in 2022. In 2021, Michigan, every time they ran the ball outside of a few, ran 5, 6, 7 yards a carry. Blake Corum had one big run. Haskins had one big run at the end, but neither of them were long touchdowns. The big plays were a result of offensive play calls that severely mismatched against Ohio State defensive calls. The defense, from a performance aspect, got better at stopping the run, got better at pressuring. The problem, of course, was somewhat play calling, somewhat coaching. Also, Jim Knowles adjusting to the Big Ten. The Big Ten is faster, bigger, more physical than the Big 12 is. Maybe the faster part I could take back if you looked when Lincoln Riley was there, or maybe even include TCU this past season. But overall, the Big Ten is just a different game. Bigger, tougher, stronger. And I think that Jim Knowles' defense in year one, it had less to do with the players, it had less to do with the technique, it had less to do with the training and the overall execution. It had more to do with his defense and what he brought over from Oklahoma State finally matching up with a great offensive line, a great run game, and an underrated set of play callers. And that's what you got when you faced Michigan in 2022. That's what happened. And then the Georgia game happened. And the Georgia game, you change Lathan Ransom falling over. You change Noah Ruggles missing that field goal. Maybe you change one of Jack Podlesny's made field goals. He had a bad night that night. Maybe he gets mentally broken and misses another field goal. You change one of Ohio State's defensive backs dropping one of Stetson Bennett's bad balls. He nearly threw 2 or 3 more interceptions than the one he actually threw in that game. Maybe you change the Brock Bowers spot where they gave him that 4th down, and originally it looked very controversial, and maybe they say there wasn't enough evidence to overturn that, and Georgia turns it over on downs there. You just change one of those things, Ohio State goes 13-1, and that humiliating, awful loss to Michigan is mostly forgiven. Because I can tell you right now as a Michigan fan, I would take losing. If you're a Buckeye, I would take losing to your program by double digits in exchange for a national title. Now, not every year. Not every year. Eventually, if Michigan, won national titles more often than not, but in those seasons they lost to Ohio State, eventually I would, want the bragging rights over my biggest rival. But the Georgia game was almost painful and beautiful at the same time because the Georgia game truly represented everything that the Michigan game should have been. Oh, Ohio State isn't built to compete on a national level. Oh, Ohio State didn't deserve to be in the playoff. Ohio State's not an elite team anymore. They're not a national title contender. They outpaced, outcoached, and were beating Georgia to a pulp for 3 quarters. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but at least 2 quarters. The first quarter, they got out fast. The third quarter, they owned the Bulldogs. That game, outside of, Lathan Ransom falling over and some of the missed defensive plays, that was the embodiment of everything the Michigan game should have been. An improvement. And Ohio State facing one of the best teams in the nation, which Michigan was, and nearly beating them and handling them on a national stage. And unfortunately, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And I will maintain my opinion that I thought Ryan Day personally was the better coach in that game. What it came down to is the fact that Kirby Smart has a better assistant head coach pool. Kirby Smart throughout the years has developed a better defensive model. Kirby Smart had home field advantage. And look, all these things, which actually traces back to who Kirby Smart is as a head coach, and the fact that he is more experienced in the area, At the end of the day, won Georgia that game. So just a few plays away from 13-1, because Ohio State would have torn apart TCU, a few plays away from that, winning a national title, and the whole narrative would change. But that's not the case here. The narrative is, it's different. The narrative is that among some, Ryan Day isn't even a top 2 head coach in the Big Ten. You know, I've seen people argue that James Franklin is ahead of Ryan Day, which I think is idiocy. There are arguments that Ohio State is on a downswerve, that Ohio State could realistically lose to Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe even Penn State too, which I'm sure if you simulated college football, the 2023 season, 1,000,000 times, that would happen in several of them. But by several can mean anything from 2 to several thousand. And the reality is that more often than not, Ohio State will probably win 11, 12, 13 games. It's more likely that Ohio State goes 15-0 than going 8-4 or 9-4, 8-5 with bowl win or bowl loss. This program's not going anywhere. And Ryan Day, in my opinion, the reason I gave several minutes of that background is really last year was defined by those 2 losses. Those 11 wins were irrelevant the minute Ohio State's season ended. They were irrelevant. Ohio State might as well have went 0-2. And it's understandable. Those were the biggest games of the year. The game. It goes the same way with Michigan, which makes the near 20-year run of Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer and the first year of Ryan Day even more confusing. The game is so important for both sides that's what judges your season. And then the playoff game, of course, because the playoff game was redemption. The playoff game was, in a sense, according to some, though I argued against this, Ohio State deserved to be in the playoff by how they played the other 11 games. By some, it was the undeserved forgiveness. They had an opportunity to redeem everything that happened in Columbus, and they couldn't do it. So understandably so, Ryan Day is being treated like he went 0-2 in 2022. Now, I don't think that's necessarily fair or good. I think a lot of that's an overreaction, but it's understandable given the expectations and given what Ohio State has done over the past 20 years. Winning a national title, technically 2, over the past 2 decades, winning several Big Ten titles, being the dominant force. The Big Ten ran through Columbus since the early 2000s up until 2023. Now, because Michigan has won the Big Ten for 2 years in a row and they've beaten Ohio State in dominant fashion, for now, and rightfully so, the Big Ten, the narrative rightfully will be that Big Ten runs through Ann Arbor as of the 2023 preseason. And as of that second win against Ohio State by Jim Harbaugh, that proved that 2021 just wasn't this fluke. But I don't think Ryan Day will even enter the conversation of being fired or on the hot seat, because again, going back to the earlier part of this video where I diagnosed and broke down my own opinions of the game and of the Peach Bowl against Georgia, I think that's the worst you're getting. That's the worst of it. I think that maybe 10-3, 11-2 is the worst you're going to get out of these Ryan Day Ohio State teams. No other team in the Big Ten, outside of Michigan, and maybe Penn State if they can improve their O-line play, maybe Wisconsin if Phil Longo's air raid / spread, whatever you want to call it, and Mike Tressel at DC, if they're the real deal, and I think they are, and they can recruit at a high level, maybe them too, maybe USC once they come to the Big Ten and they can get Alex Grinch figured out. But if things stay relatively the same, and there's really only 1, 2, maybe 3 consistent contenders for the Big Ten every year, it's the way it is in the SEC. It's Alabama or Georgia. LSU would be that third kind of team. In the Big Ten right now, it's Michigan and Ohio State. No one else has a semblance of a team to be able to outlast and out-endure Ohio State in 4 quarters. They do not. No defense outside of Michigan's can hold Ohio State in a low-scoring battle. No defense outside of Michigan's in the Big Ten can frustrate Ohio State's offense out of its mind into making mental errors. Iowa's defense could, but their offense is so porous that they can't score on Ohio State's defense, so it doesn't matter. Ohio State, you saw this last year, they blew out the Hawkeyes. In 4 quarters, they hung 54 points. Ryan Day's built that team. The only 2 conference losses are to Michigan. The only 2. He's 31-2 in the Big Ten as a head coach, 45-6. And again, a lot of those things that played into the Michigan loss in 2022, he had a new defensive staff. Of course the defense wasn't going to be elite. It's a Big 12 scheme coming into the Big Ten, and Jim Knowles he's not like Don Brown. He's making changes. The jack position will probably be mostly eliminated, and you're going to see more of that traditional, strong, balanced 4-man defensive line that matches up better with Michigan's offense and matches up better with the Big Ten as a whole. With Davis and Igbinosun and Jihad Carter, Ohio State and the Buckeyes are utilizing the portal to improve things on defense. That game, as much as it does define Ohio State's season, it's year 1 for Jim Knowles. It's year 1 for the staff. And the players and their execution and their techniques, you saw it firsthand. They were a better defense than they were in 2021. A much better defense. Part of the problem that I didn't mention earlier was Michigan was also a better team compared to 2021. Both Michigan and Ohio State improved compared to their counterparts last year. And not only that, but Michigan's play calling, Michigan's schematically, not even counting play calling, but just what they like to do in general, matches up extremely well with Ohio State. And Michigan and Georgia, both of them run a pro spread. I mean, Georgia was able to hang 41 points on Ohio State. I mean, these teams that have the capacity to have some speed and also some power, that's a combination that even for any defense is hard to stop. It's why Michigan hung 40 on Iowa last year in the Big Ten title. And all these different things. And Ryan Day is a play caller and a decision maker. I don't know what it is, but in the 2 games against Michigan, he isn't as phenomenal of a play caller as he is in his other 49 games as a head coach. I don't exactly know what it is. I think it's partially a mental thing. But I think the defensive staff being in year 2, I think the running back room likely being healthier than last year, because having both your starting running backs injured is an anomaly. It doesn't happen that often. All these things combined makes me think as a Michigan fan that even though I do believe Michigan will win this year, and I don't think Ohio State's winning the national title, can they? Absolutely. But Ryan Day is a good chance to win a national title, to compete at a high level. And they can do it. If Ohio State goes 15-0, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I controversially have Michigan going 15-0, and not just going 15-0, but I think they're beating Ohio State once in Ann Arbor and a second time in the national title. If you were to switch those roles and tell me Ohio State would go 15-0, beat Michigan once in Ann Arbor, once in the national title game, I'd believe it. Ohio State has the talent to do so. They have the coaching to do so. They have everything it takes to succeed at the highest level. They do. The problem is, it's college football, and as much as you control your own destiny, there are other programs you have to account for. So, is Ryan Day doing the best that he can at Ohio State? Is he playing his A-plus game every game? I don't necessarily think so. I think that Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, Jim Harbaugh are definitely better head coaches. I would argue that just factoring in both recency bias and past historical bias, I'd say Dabo Swinney's a better head coach. I'd say Kyle Whittingham, even from a recency bias standpoint, is a better head coach, does a lot more with less. Some would argue Lincoln Riley is better. I think Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley are they're in somewhat of a similar category if you just look at record and achievement, though I think Ryan Day, personally, I think is a better head coach. But there are just a lot of different things that play into what goes on in a season, why things happen. It's why analytics and numbers are just as important as the feelings. The facts and the feelings are equally as important. And I think that what fans sometimes don't realize is that the facts side of it. I mean, he went 11-2. If Jim Harbaugh went 11-2, now this year it's different because they're number 5 in returning production. But look, when they lose most of their roster in 2024, if they go 10-3 or 11-2, then I would be happy. I would be happy. And Ryan Day's beaten Michigan before. He's 2-0 in the Big Ten championship game. He has won 2 Big Ten titles. He's won a playoff game. He's won the Rose Bowl. And I know Ohio State fans are looking for that national title. I think Ryan Day will win a national title at Ohio State. I don't think he'll be fired, nor do I think he'll be fired any time soon. He's under pressure to compete for a national title, and eventually, if he doesn't do it soon, he'll be under pressure to win one. There's no doubt about that. But most importantly, to beat Michigan. He is not on the hot seat, not even close. And I don't see how the Buckeyes could justify firing Day if he doesn't beat Michigan, but wins 10, 11, or 12 other games. If he goes, 10-3 this year, then there might be some talk of hot seat because that'd be the worst season Ohio State's had since 2011. But he wouldn't be fired after that. Maybe if he repeated it in 2024 or something, but he'd just be put under pressure. He wouldn't be fired for that, for going 10-3. If he went 11-2, wouldn't be fired for that either. And if he went 12-1, let's just theorize this. If he went 12-1, undefeated in every game but loses to Michigan, Ohio State maybe is they're ranked number 5, and they blow out their opponent in their New Year's Six Bowl and they're 12-1, only loss is to Michigan, not going to fire him either. And they're not going to fire him for going 11-2 again and either losing 2 regular season games but winning his New Year's Six Bowl, or reaching the playoff again, losing that and losing to Michigan. Wouldn't be fired. And he won't be fired, nor should he be fired. And I think that whether it's 2023 and my preseason predictions are wrong and Ohio State recaptures the Big Ten, whether it's 2024 and after Michigan loses a ton of production and Penn State kind of comes more into the fray, which is a little bit of my way, way too early thoughts on 2024, and Ohio State's talent is still there, I do think Ryan Day will capture another Big Ten title, and I do think he will win a national championship at some point. He's a great head coach. There's a reason that Urban handpicked him to succeed the program when he retired. There's a reason. He's been an integral part of this program since 2017. What he's done with Ohio State's offense, that's the reason I think Ohio State's guaranteed 10, 11 regular season wins. No defense, again, outside of Michigan's, can stop that offense when it's fully functioning. And with those players, if those players are healthy, fully working, no defense but Michigan's can stop it. None. You may think you can. You may be like Penn State last year in 2021, where maybe you get out to a lead, but no, eventually you get crushed, you get squashed, or you miss a tackle and the speed that they have in space kills you. That's all Ryan Day. That is what Ryan Day is, and I know part of it's shifted away from the defense, but he's, the whole defensive staff is going to be in year 2, so let's see what that looks like. And the offense, they return Henderson, Williams, Hayden, their entire wide receiver core, their 2 starting guards. Yes, they lose C.J. Stroud, but they're going to be probably healthier on the offensive side of the ball. And I think Kyle McCord or Devin Brown, I'm pretty sure it's McCord who's going to start, they will be great. They'll be great. I don't think they'd be at CJ Stroud's level, at least in year one, but I could be wrong. I thought that CJ Stroud would be a pretty significant downgrade from Justin Fields. And that wasn't the case. In fact, he was a much better passer than Fields ever was. Now, was he a better quarterback? That could probably be a whole different video amongst itself. But in conclusion, I think that Ryan Day is under pressure to compete at the highest level. He's under pressure to beat Michigan, that's for sure, both internally and externally. But he is not on the hot seat. And if he is, then I do not know what bizarro world we are in. If Ryan Day is fired for doing what he did last year, for example, let's say if it gets repeat, or if he's fired for going 10-3 with the most road games Ohio State has played in several decades, that might be the beginning of the end for Ohio State football's long, successful run that dates back to late World War II. But I don't think Ohio State will fire him. I think Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh, and that I think the game will be competitive. I don't think it's going to turn from a lopsided Ohio State bludgeoning to a lopsided Michigan bludgeoning. I do think Ryan Day will win a national title. He'll win probably more than one Big Ten title for the rest of his career at Ohio State. I think Ohio State is in good hands. But let me know what you think down below. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the notification bell and like this video. Please watch it all the way through, or if you have, thank you, and share this video around. I'll talk to you guys later.